Yeah, thanks, guys. So we listed off 8 behaviors, and these are the behaviors that we think are the most important behaviors to learn some creative solutions for, and that are behaviors that are likely going to be the behaviors that put our dogs at risk most frequently. So number 1, we listed as fear. So fear, we know, can be manifested in tons of different ways. Dogs in our shelter, the shelter itself, we know, can be a terrifying place. So we have generalized fear issues. We have fear issues that can be triggered by specific stimulus. In any case, Reagan and I are going to be talking through some in-shelter solutions, and then, of course, when and how and if to resolve stuff in foster. So with your fearful dogs, we certainly believe that these guys are likely going to need some sort of intervention to make the environment feel less threatening, to gain confidence, to learn more about them. The scaredy cats are often the dogs that assumptions are made about them. They're lumped into an aggressive category. They're dogs who, if space is at a premium, those are some of the dogs that get selected for space euthanasia because they're hiding in the back and no one can come get them. And so couple videos that I'm going to play for you. One quick one is a technique that we call the flexi routine. And if anyone's like, what? You're using a flexi leash? I know. It's crazy that we're using a flexi leash. Sometimes I feel like people respond to using flexi leashes like e-collars. But yes, they're evil in some ways, but they also can be helpful. So with the flexi leash, for scaredy dogs, it can actually be very empowering to give the dog the choice of being far away from you. And we're looking to just mark and reward through clicker training any decision the dog makes to look at the handler. And so we're not talking to the dog a lot. We're not baby talking the dog, because likely that's not that motivating for a scared dog. And when we put a scared dog on like a 5-foot, 6-foot leash, that's actually likely aversive to a scared dog who does not want to be that close to you. So this flexi work, we can go in an open space. The dog can choose to be 16 feet away from us if he wants to, but any decision the dog makes to decrease that distance or to even look at us from 16 feet, we're gonna mark that and toss some food to the dog. We're even gonna nonchalantly lob the food over without looking at him. He can then pick the food up when we're not looking at him if he wants to kind of wait till we're not staring at him. But through that process, you'll see the dog often choose to decrease that distance on their own, and that ability to make a choice on their own can be very empowering for the fearful dog. And then we have multiple handlers work this same process, because one of the number one mistakes we make in sheltering with the scared dogs is we get that one really compassionate staff member or volunteer to go sit in that dog's kennel every day and read to him and bring him cheeseburgers. And that's great for the moment that that dog has that volunteer. But are we actually making that dog more adoptable, right? Is that dog actually generalizing to anyone other than that one handler? And that's a mistake we all make, and it's a heartfelt mistake because we're just trying to build a relationship with that dog. But unless you're the one adopting that dog, think about it, right? If an adopter comes in, have we actually prepped that dog for anyone other than that one person? So by focusing on techniques like this that generalize our dogs and teach them the power of choosing to be near a person, that can really generalize them to the point of having multiple handlers in your shelter. Does that make sense? Cool. So stop cutting the flexies when they come into your shelter and trashing them. You can use them occasionally for nice stuff like that. Make sense? Is anyone horrified by flexi leash? Okay. So now, you're fearful dogs, and you're going to see some common threads throughout each one of these behaviors. We firmly believe that we want to offer playgroups as a standard resource to really every dog in our care. Now, every dog won't benefit from playgroup. So when we say at DPFL, every dog, every day, we don't literally mean every single dog, but we want to offer it to every dog because we don't want you to make assumptions that a dog won't benefit from playgroup just because they're fearful or just because they're X, Y, or Z. So I'm not going to be able to play the entire 6-minute video just based on time, but I want you to see some progress about a dog named Swiffer. So this is Swiffer on day 1 at intake. You guys all have dogs at your shelter that present like this. She's hiding in the back of her kennel. She's not eating. She's not drinking. She's not taking food from anybody. She's not defensive. She's not showing any aggression. But she's almost catatonic, right? Has anyone seen this video already? Because some of you probably have. We use it a lot. So that's day 1. I don't think that petting is rewarding to her. And so we're big on, let's look at the individual dog and what's actually rewarding and what's actually aversive. And I honestly believe a dog that fearful, I don't think that petting is actually pleasant to that dog. So this is the dog on day 1. I want you to look at the video, but and this is also contingent on me being able to somehow see. Okay, there we go. You get the point with her on day 1. Let me see if I can. Okay, this is her in the playgroup yard. So she would not walk.
You were just shoplifting.
Brought out to the playgroup yard.
Yeah. Oh, that's
dog is
pretty nice and handy.
It's critical for if we're talking about playgroups, but if you're bringing out a dog like her, she is only brought out with known, stable, social dogs. You don't ever want to expose a dog who's this soft and this vulnerable to dogs that you don't know and that you don't trust. But when you are able to offer this resource, it can significantly expedite your efforts to have the dog gain confidence.
Girl. Right, she's up.
Well, at least she stood up.
Stood up. That's a step.
You had to get someone from the ground up to motivate her.
Yeah. Somebody lower than him.
Uh-huh.
Very nice. That's very nice.
So she at least walked around,
What a beautiful
which is improvement for day 1. This is the end of day 1. She's actually walking now. You saw the very end of that. Now, the handler was using a second dog because we identified this dog has pack drive. Dogs are motivating to her. Let's have a second dog with us to model that behavior. Now, this is day 2. She's still scared, but can you notice this huge difference?
Number 2.
To the front of her
For
kennel,
the healer puppy.
right? So she's anticipating something good might actually occur. I'm still scared,
Look at that.
but maybe this is not as scary of a place as I thought.
This is
And now look at this.
Valentine's Day,
So proud.
February 14th.
And so by bringing her with stable social dogs,
Okay, this is end
we're
of play session
immediately
number 2.
increasing her quality of life, increasing her confidence, and now she can model behavior with humans. The people in the yard are relevant, and the other dogs aren't afraid of the people in the yard, so then maybe she'll come around and start to warm up to humans. And in a way, we are positively reinforcing the behavior of coming out of your kennel by giving you
Healer's the
play
dog
group,
you couldn't touch
right?
yesterday.
So if she actually sees dogs as a positive, which obviously she does, this now means humans mean I get to go out and play with dogs. Therefore, humans aren't scary.
He can go to the office, please.
Okay, rest of the video is just
He can go
day
in.
3, her walking out of the kennel beautifully with a handler without a second dog around. Okay, and so for us, and that's not an uncommon occurrence for us in playgroup. And so even your fearful dogs, especially your fearful dogs, should be candidates to come out to see if they have that pack drive.
So the second thing that we can really do for fearful dogs is obviously get them to foster. We know that in-shelter behavior is not indicative of out-of-shelter behavior. So we wanted to give you this little case study on this little cutie named Macaroon, who is quite a fearful creature in shelter. He was a dog that we had to have on a double long drag leash in his kennel. He was actually relatively defensive, so he would snap if he felt invaded. Playgroup was his favorite thing in the world. He no longer was a white dog. He was a brown dog after playgroup, and he just would like rub up against all the walls, and everyone just like acted like they were eating macaroon, and he loved it. But with people, we really had a hard time getting Macaroon to open up to anyone. So who wants to adopt a dog like that, even though he looks really standardly attractive? So no one could touch him. He came out to playgroup. We were like, oh my God, he's a dog. And then he went to a situation where he actually got away from a handler, and he ran 10 miles for 2 weeks before we were able to trap him. He was a very, 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 very flight risk dog. Now, this is a picture of him in his adoptive home. You can see he does not have a leash on him. He lives with another dog. He's a snuggle bug at home. They actually put costumes on him for Christmas. It's very cute. But how different can a dog be from shelter to in-home if you can just get these dogs into foster homes?
Yeah, I think of all of the behaviors, I think it's those scared dogs that we really, if we could wave a magic wand, we'd get them all into foster, right? When you have them, we gave you some, fast, ideas of some things you could do in shelter, but getting them out of that environment is the key. Okay, second behavior, arousal issues. So when we say arousal issues, we mean everything from hard mouthing, jumping, leash climbing, that kind of behavior. We know that is, again, almost always a product of the environment. These are generally strong, smart, active dogs, and now, as we've talked about this entire conference, we are doing the complete opposite of what a dog like this needs. We are just segregating them in isolation, in little concrete runs. So why wouldn't they have arousal issues? So we can all, I think, hopefully get to a point where we are not judging the dog and basing assumptions about the dog's suitability based off of a product of the environment we're forcing them to be in. But what do? Right? We still have to treat them and help them overcome that. So some quick techniques to be able to have you guys implement back home. We want you to really, first and foremost, treat the whole dog, right? It's really hard to treat the byproduct of the environment and only have that be your training plan. So what I mean is if the dog is only getting out like once a day for a 15-minute training session to not jump on people, how the heck is he not going to jump on people? That's like the one time he ever got to interact with a person, and he had no exercise or anything prior to that, right? So it's going to be hard to resolve that if that's where you're putting your focus. So we're going to be broken records, but make sure you've got things in your shelter that are systemized, playgroup opportunities, dog walks, CGC type programs, field trips, jogging programs. Those are programs that your dogs need to be plugged into systematically as soon as they get to you. You will reduce or prevent most of this stuff, but still, that you still have those issues to work through. So one thing we focused on a ton at APA is the CGC Ready program. So we focused on it because of how it already had 10 tests built into it that really prepped the dog for the real world and would resolve things like if the dog's going to pass a CGC test, then that means they're not going to have arousal issues when meeting a person. It means they're not going to be on-leash reactive when coming by a dog. So it at least gives us like a target of what to work towards. So for all these dogs, they're worked on these friendly stranger greetings. The dog has to, in order to pass the test, has to have his butt on the ground, hanging out near his handler, not break until being cued he's allowed to break, and then the friendly stranger has to pet the dog, check his ears, pet him, pick up his paws, and then brush him. And so that's a fantastic way to prep these dogs for the real world, but it's also the training that we implement to get through these arousal issues. And my heart always breaks for those dogs who are just so stoked to finally be able to see a person, and they can't handle it, right? Because it's their one chance to get out of the kennel, and now they jump up and they clock you in the chin, And so let's teach them some skills to actually go home, and this is how you meet a person. I think in shelters a lot we focus on all of these things, but we don't focus as well as I think we should on just getting pet by people and being calm about it, And so I think that's a really important thing to work on. This video is we kind of made a training series at APA on all sorts of different behaviors for our adopters. And so this tie-down exercise can be really easy to do at your shelter. You can get even novice volunteers to help be a part of this exercise. And what you're doing is you're tethering the dog.
He's tethered, so
I'm
that
probably
we
just
can
describing in the video.
Trying to show him that to gain
Can't really hear
access
that,
to a
can you?
person, so Amy's going to walk up right now.
So
You
the
have to
dog
have
is on a
floor
tie-down.
floor. Or
You can
lay
line
down.
up
Or butt
several
on the ground.
handlers.
That's even better. That he's
And the
laying
whole
down.
goal is as long as the dog has either his butt on the ground or 4 on the floor, whatever the dog knows. If he knows a sit, try to hold him to a sit. But if he doesn't know sit, just take 4 on the floor. And each handler is going to take turns walking up to the dog, getting some nice pets in. If at any point his paws come up or his butt pops up, you just take a step back, you ignore the dog, you wait for that dog to go 4 paws on the floor again, you go back up, you pet the dog. Once you've had a full session of some nice pets, you go to the back of the line, and the next person walks up. Same thing. You walk up. As long as that dog is sitting, you're walking up and petting the dog. That dog pops up, you remove your attention. So that's positive reinforcement and negative punishment. We are giving our attention for the behavior we want. We are taking away our attention for the behavior we don't want. And so you can do this exercise all over the shelter. You can get a carabiner, go to a fence outdoors. You can go inside. So it's easy to generalize, and it's easy to generalize by using multiple handlers to teach the dog that you get petting, you get people to come pet you as long as you've got 4 on the floor. That makes sense, right? Cool. So that's that exercise. And then this other exercise we call boing. And so it's teaching the dog, especially those dogs that are super motivated to jump on you for food. So the handler is tacking the leash with his foot so that the dog does not feel any leash pressure as long as they have 4 on the floor, whether it's standing, sitting, down, whatever the position is that you're holding them to, they don't have any leash pressure. But if the dog were to jump up for your food, they would feel that leash pressure as they jump up. As soon as they went back down, the pressure's gone. I'll play that one more time while I'm describing it. And then you are then bringing that food down, and that food is going down and rewarding them as long as they've got 4 on the floor. So we're using positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. We are rewarding the behavior we want, and then when the dog pops up and feels that leash pressure, then goes back down, the pressure leaves, that's negative reinforcement. So it's another quick way to work anywhere, and your volunteers can do this too. It's kind of fun. It's really fun to watch the dogs kind of, that light bulb turns on of, oh, wait, oh, this is how I get the food. Got it. So that game called Boing can be another fun way to work on arousal issues.
Right. It's really interesting because the dog in the first video, his name is Pinocchio, and he is now in a foster home. And then the second dog in the video is Gilbert, and Gilbert was adopted by his foster. So those are all really exciting. But we want to talk about this spunky little lady named Farah, who we fondly called Fruit Bat. She was a hellion in her kennel, outside of her kennel, in the shelter environment. This was everyone's least favorite dog to actually get out of the kennel. Once you got her out and like away from things, she just panted and freaked out all the time. But she was up and tagging you and redirection and all that stuff. She had to be on muzzle if she was going to go to playgroup. She did not enjoy playgroup. And here's the thing. She had a grade 4 heart murmur. So all of this anxiety, all of this arousal, everything that we would normally do to help her in shelter was not going to help her. It was going to kill her. So what we were able to do was get her into a foster home and find out, oh, she's a couch potato. So she ended up being a couch potato in her foster home and luckily was adopted. And unfortunately, because of her heart murmur, a couple of months ago, she passed away. But she also got to be a big sister to a Great Pyrenees puppy. Remember when I said that she had to be on muzzle in playgroup and we would have never sent her home with another dog? In shelter behavior, not indicative of out of shelter behavior. So a foster home absolutely saved this dog's life and allowed her to have the amount of life that she had.
Yeah, exactly. That's what is so special to me is that it's not that we couldn't, we would have found a way, but gosh, it would have kept her in shelter so much longer. Getting her into foster and then identifying, oh my gosh, you are nothing like the dog you are in the shelter, got her to live a life so much sooner. Knowing that she had a shortened life because of that condition, at least she got to be able to get to a life as soon as possible with the benefit of being able to have a foster team and a shelter team communicate about what her needs are and how to place her in foster safely. It turns out once she got to foster, she was just a breeze. Okay, We could talk the entire weekend about arousal and reactivity issues, right? So we're going to try to do this in like 3 minutes. So barrier and on-leash reactivity. That is probably one of the most, if not the most, deadly behavior for our dogs in our shelters. And when I say that, it's because of, one, assumptions that are made about dogs based on barrier reactivity and on-leash reactivity. If I could leave this earth doing one thing, it might be getting everyone to stop introducing dogs on leashes. If we could just banish on-leash assessments, I would probably die a happy man. So on-leash reactivity and barrier reactivity, we cannot say those are indicative of aggression. They're important to know. They're important to know the dog may be barrier reactive or on-leash reactive, but we cannot make the assumption that that dog is aggressive. So one, it's deadly to shelter dogs because of those assumptions that are made. And two, it's just hard to handle in shelter, right? It can cause safety issues. It can cause very difficult situations for handlers. It can result in redirection issues. So because of that, we put a heavy emphasis on how we resolve on-leash reactivity and barrier reactivity in shelters. As an example of assumptions being made, this dog is obviously barrier reactive. Matilda. So adopters assumed she was aggressive. Staff at this shelter assumed she was aggressive. People were lobbying for her euthanasia because they thought she was a threat to public safety based on this behavior. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like a dog that I wanted to go into her kennel, right? However, this is how Matilda acted with the same person she was just talking smack to. This is her interacting with him literally 60 seconds later. See her leg go? Oh, she did like that. Yeah. So we see this everywhere. These dogs that are barrier reactive, and literally the second you open the door, they're just like, "Oh, just kidding. I didn't mean it." And so I'm not saying to just go start opening doors for dogs that are barrier reactive, right? You have to have a sense of being able to identify certain things in that dog that make you feel like it is defensive in nature. But more often than not, we don't find that dogs who are barrier reactive are just these killer dogs waiting to just have that door removed and then they're going to come eat everybody. Like, it's generally a byproduct of frustration and fear and defensiveness. And again, literally, that there's no more proof I need to see than that's the dog outside of the kennel. So why would I choose to believe she's the dog in her kennel? It's just not logical. So that's just now, barrier activity can be hard to stop. It can almost be impossible to stop in your shelter, because you could sit outside that kennel for 5 hours, clicking and treating every single time someone walked by. But then when you leave and people continue to walk by, and then she's not getting that conditioning, it's going to kind of unravel, right? She's not really getting frequent information. And so I've only seen one way to resolve barrier reactivity, which is you really control the environment. You have their food kind of hanging on buckets, and you make sure that every person that walks by that kennel is a part of the plan, and they're just kind of hucking that dog's food to them as they walk by. You are just classically conditioning the stimulus of a person walking by the kennel with getting their food. But you have to kind of control that environment and make sure people aren't walking by and not doing that. So for what it's worth, if your kennel is set up that way and you have the resources, that has shown to work. Otherwise, our suggestions are, again, treat the whole dog. That dog's telling you they need something. Get them to play groups, get them to training classes, get them to foster. Very much get them to foster, especially when you pull them out of the kennel and you see, oh gosh, you're lovely. Get them to foster. Now, on-leash reactivity, I'm sorry to have to go so quickly on this, you guys. Certainly some training tools we think can help. We love to go to head halters as a first choice for on-leash reactivity. It doesn't mean we're just going to be like, this is the tool and you shall wear it. It's got to work for the dog. A lot of dogs have to be acclimated to the head halter before they're going to be sometimes they'll be fussy with it. But we found that if we can have steering of their head when they're being reactive, that can help us guide them away and get them to think about other stuff. We are huge on conditioning eye contact. So in our training programs at APA and DPFL, eye contact is the most rewardable behavior. So we shape it, we condition it, we capture it. We teach them that doorways and dogs in the environment and bicycles and anything out there is an environmental cue to find your handler. Because what they're looking at is what they're thinking about. So I want you thinking about me, not staring at the dog and then waiting to be told a look command. So we don't teach look on a cue. We actually shape it and condition it. I think that is more advanced because it gives the dog those coping skills and that generalization. So they're not just staring, waiting to be told what to do. They already know, oh, dog means boom. All right, what should we do? Right? That's the training that we install for reactivity work. And again, I know I could go on that, but kennel routines are also critical for both arousal and on-leash reactivity. So here's a video of what a kennel routine looks like. And this is mandatory for any handler taking a dog out at APA and at DPFL and any shelters that I consult with through DPFL. We love to teach them this kennel routine. So the whole point is it's somewhat similar to that tie-down exercise I showed you with Gilbert for jumping. We want 4 on the floor before we ever go in that kennel. When we're in that kennel, we're going to reward and capture behavior we want. We're going to start marking and rewarding them for 4 on the floor. We're going to leash them up, and we're going to teach every dog that in order to exit this kennel, you've got to offer some eye contact. You've either got to have 4 on the floor or your butt on the ground. You've got to hold that until you've heard your release command, which we use as free. So an open door is not your cue to just bolt out and make the choice yourself. Let's get you in a much better frame of mind. Let's get you thinking. Let's get you processing. Let's get you connecting to a human and realizing that the human is the one who is going to bring you to the best things in life. Looking to the human is how you get out of your kennel, and that way we're really building that relationship and building those coping skills in shelter. So this is a video we made for staff and volunteers at APA describing the ins and outs of a kennel routine. So I firmly believe it's a bit of an investment up front. You're going to have all those people in your shelter like, I don't have time for that. This will be easier and quicker when you're all doing it because you're not going to have all these significant arousal issues as much when you're all focusing on kennel routines. And then, a couple more things. So, click for quiet. If you haven't heard of it, this is click for quiet. While I do stand by what I said about barrier reactivity, we can try. We can do everything we can to reduce barrier reactivity. So click for quiet, even for the little cheweeny things. It's as easy as you're walking around, you are clicking and treating for anything other than barking and jumping. So do you have 4 on the floor and are you quiet? Yes, I'm clicking and treating. And you're just floating around your kennels. You're getting as many people in it as possible, especially like during walk time. It's a really great way to have people who aren't maybe allowed to walk yet go do click for quiet. So click for quiet is an awesome thing and literally anyone can do it, right? Like it's the easiest thing in the world. Now, this last video I think is the most important video of the presentation, so perk up. This is an example of why you hear me so passionately talking about why barrier reactivity and on-leash reactivity cannot be used to assume dogs. This is the dog's very first time coming to playgroup. So obviously on-leash reactive.
I just had it happen for the first time.
Like 3 times I've been literally. The dogs in the yard are helper dogs. These are dogs who are up for adoption, but they have shown to be impeccable with other dogs. We can trust them to not aggress at another dog, even if the dog shows aggression. We can trust that they will be emotionally stout enough to kind of handle it if a dog is kind of icky to them. And if you're wondering, did we condition the dog to the muzzle first? We did not, and I would love to talk more in depth about that, but the main reason is when you're working in a high volume operation, we have to find solutions quick. We can't deprive this dog from playgroup while we muzzle condition him. The reactivity will get worse. By the way, that dog's my dog. The white dog was my dog. She wasn't at the time, but. So my helper dogs, especially Lydia, told me this dog's cool. This dog's fine. I'm play-bowing at him. I think this dog's cool. So I felt completely comfortable taking the muzzle off at that point. And now look at it. So I can't tell you how much this video and this experience means to me, and I want it to mean to you all, because more often than not, this dog, Tony, based on that behavior we saw in the catch pen, would be assumed to be dog aggressive, would be assumed to be a dog who cannot go home with other dogs, would be a dog that even if you're a special shelter and you could put training resources into that, you're now frankly wasting finite resources trying to train this dog not to be on-leash reactive when all he needed was to come out and play with dogs, right? And at worst, this dog's a euthanasia candidate in shelters based on that behavior. At best, we're saying he's an only dog. He's an adult pit bull type dog who we're now saying can't go home with dogs. And now he's an immediate long stay, right? And so being able to shed some of the, oh my God, you didn't condition him to a muzzle. Oh my gosh, how could you ever bring him into a yard full of dogs if he's behaving that way? It's not Wild West. We're not just throwing him out and we'll figure it out. There's a very, very informed process to it, but Tony cannot afford for us to kind of go, like, hold dear to that book and say we have to muzzle condition for 2 weeks, we have to do tandem walks now for 2 months. He can't afford that. He's going to go crazy in our shelter. And so I hope you kind of were as inspired by that video as I was when I experienced it in the first place. Did we have anything on? Well, yeah. So what's so cool about foster and partnerships?
Yes, good job.
This dog that Reagan's going to talk about, Miguel, is a perfect example of how in shelter we can diagnose on-leash reactive, barrier reactive, actually dog aggressive, and how foster can come into play.
Yeah, so Miguel was much like Tony coming into the catch pen. I was actually there for his first evaluation at Austin Animal Center, and it was a lot. We put him on muzzle, and he immediately came in and immediately aggressed upon another dog, and he was what we call uninterruptible, which means we went through all of our tools, and he was very difficult to stop. We had to physically intervene to get him off of the other dog, and it's possible that without the muzzle, he could have done severe damage. So this is where he was sent over to APA to be evaluated. And we experienced the same thing of anytime there was a dog, I'm gonna go out of my way to go and potentially aggress upon that dog. Now, a lot of people would question, is that a safe dog to place out into the community? Luckily, with the resources that Austin Pets Alive has, we did so much work with Miguel. Every single day, the behavior team was out there doing work with him to counter condition all of this, so that when he saw dog, it was auto sit and, hey, what are we doing? Hey, what are we doing? Tell me what to do. Because I don't think you want me to go after that dog, so tell me what to do.
As can be seen.
As can be seen with Hannah. Yes. So there he is doing a lovely dog pass by with, I believe, is that a Zydeco, another very reactive dog, or maybe a Monty? So he's able to kind of hold his crap together, right? And then he goes out to foster. He loves people, that was never a question, but he was a dog that was able to come and walk through the parking lot on a muzzle just to be safe, but he's not pulling towards dogs. He's not going everywhere. He's not trying to access the dogs that he was before. So foster mellowed him out, again, using partnership with shelter work to counter condition to him to dogs in general.
And thank you, Reagan. And that's what's, I think, important for me to also express on this is that, of course, we couldn't agree more on the push to move towards fostering as an industry and to stop just kenneling dogs nonstop. A dog who demonstrates actual dog aggression, right? This is now actual dog aggression. We've gone through the paces, we've assessed them in playgroup, we've found this is not barrier reactivity, this is not on-leash reactivity, this is true dog aggression. this is a dog who shouldn't go straight to foster, right? Because to me, that's not super safe to put a dog with no training foundation into foster that we believe will go out of his way to seek out conflict with the dog. So he gets trained in the behavior department, they put everything into him, they give him all the foundation so he can pull off that type of close quarter work with a dog. But now for us to say we can now ethically place him, we've got to proof him in a home. So let's work with foster, get him into a foster home, and now do that same work in the real world. And now that's it, right? That's the name of the game. And luckily his fosters just kept him. Yep. But that type of collaboration and being able to truly diagnose what are we dealing with, and then we can make those informed decisions. Tony could have gone straight to foster because we're just dealing with on-leash reactivity. He's not actually dog aggressive, so get him to foster. Miguel, we actually have an issue. Let's work on it, then proof it in foster. Cool. Oh man, we have 4 minutes, guys. All right. You wanted this to be longer, right? Okay, tell them that. All right. So bite history is not a behavior problem, right? Because why did they bite? What was the context? What were the variables? Get the actual information. But we chose it because, often dogs are lumped into it's a bite dog, right? What the hell is a bite dog? All dogs are capable of biting. A bite isn't a bite isn't a bite. So the onus that we want to share with you with dogs who have a bite history is first and foremost, be a detective. Find out every bit of information you can about what occurred at the time of the bite. Because that, and only that, is going to tell you, okay, now who is this dog? What was it provoked? What was the trigger? How serious was the injury? Everything that you can learn about that then can develop a plan for the dog. Is it just management? Was the dog just in pain and lashed out defensively or fearfully? Is it that he's guarding a bone? Is it, right? You're learning that tells you, is it a management issue? Is it a training issue? If it is a training issue, it shows you what the trigger is. And then you can now implement any form of kind of a conditioning process to now change his association to said trigger. But you can't handle them all the same because every dog's an individual and every dog's going to have their own individual kind of story as to what occurred when something broke down, okay? And so, again, I think as a really good example, the dog in this video actually had 4 bites on record at the time of this video. Now, a lot of places would just kill him for that, for 4 bites. No questions asked, you've bitten a human 4 times, bye-bye. But this is who the dog is outside of the very, very specific context that those bites occurred. He is a dog who, in his kennel, is so very reactive to humans that if a human's finger goes in, your finger will get bit. So 4 separate bites on 4 separate people, both all minor bites on the tip of fingers. Now, the shelter should have intervened prior to 4 bites, right? They should have found some other resource for this dog. Get him to foster, signage, a better kennel, right? They shouldn't have allowed 4 people's fingers to get bit and for this poor dog to serve quarantine 4 separate times. But the point is he a bite dog, right? Is he a dog now that we can just kind of write off and say you're not safe? No, in my opinion, no, because outside of his kennel, he never demonstrated any human aggression. So I think he's a perfect candidate for foster because he's telling us, I can't handle this place. I cannot handle this place. I'm acting so different than who I am as a dog in my kennel. Please get me out of here. But even just outside of it, that yard was 15 yards away from his kennel, and he's a lovely dog right there, right? So find out about who those dogs are and glean what the triggers were.
Yeah. And for those dogs who, may have triggers that you understand and may have issues like that, we'll go through this really quick. My favorite dogs to place in foster are behavior bite dogs. Why? Because one of 2 reasons. They're either going to continue being who they are in shelter and never get adopted and be long stays, or 2, you're going to find out who they are outside of the shelter and they're not that dog. some of the things that you can do is you can give them, we call it a behavior consult. It's basically a conversation plus a piece of paper that details that dog individually. What are their triggers? What can you do to avoid those triggers and or counter condition those triggers? So different things like that. That is extremely helpful. All dogs should be treated like individuals with their bite records.
We're done, but we're skipping number 6. If you do everything we've told you to do, your dogs who are just kind of checked out, not paying attention to people, you'll find that spark for them. Play groups, individual training sessions, foster, you'll find that spark. Anxiety, get them out of the shelter, get them into foster, right? As quickly as you can, get them out. And so what's a passive approach to this, but I think maybe your biggest victory and biggest way to deal with this is a lot of what the other speakers have been talking about, open adoptions, having enrichment opportunities. Those things are going to get these dogs out of here. If you're doing vet checks and landlord checks and you're not getting them to playgroup and you're not getting them out of their kennel, they're just these anxious balls of stress, and now you're not letting them go home because you're not letting them participate in things that enrich them. You're not letting them participate in things that will increase their adoptability, and then you're judging people too harshly and not letting them adopt that dog. And so now it's a vicious cycle, and that dog just continues to get more and more anxious. So get that dog into foster. I wish we could talk more about Vicky. She's a perfect example of the fact that this dog was bat blank crazy in shelter, and in home is a lovely couch potato. And lastly, you guys, food guarding. If you want to hang out and watch this video, I love you all for watching this video. So, food guarding. What? Oh my goodness. Food guarding. Well, it's ironic so because what I'm going to tell you to do about food guarding is nothing. Stop. Just stop.
No hands in food.
So Maddie's had an amazing article in 2018. They published a study that shows it's the least predictive behavior from shelter to home and home to shelter. So just like stop. And if you want proof, watch this video. It's a short video.
When we got her.
I wish you could hear it.
Better.
Man. Okay, so this is the adopter discussing the fact that they came in, they loved this dog, Sydney. We told them, she's got food guarding. This is the food guarding during the behavior evaluation. Those are some intense bites on that fake hand.
Good.
This was at a shelter in New York.
She's very a good dog. She's not a bad one. And she loves us, and we love her too.
So those are some pretty strong bites. This is her in the home with we didn't do any training with her. We counseled and we placed with the right waiver.
A little bit, but didn't put a ton of resources into it at the shelter, just kind of counseled.
Okay.
When the family came in, they understood. We sent them home with a little pamphlet
So,
on how to work.
point being, this was not a dog who was going to guard in the real world. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. It's a manageable behavior. Counsel on it. Make sure they're informed. Make sure you've documented they've heard you on that. Be ready to help them if it shows up.
Yeah, her own room.
But the dog's not a food guarder. She was having a hard time in the shelter. And even if she did, that study shows that food guarders hardly ever get returned. People are perfectly happy being like, all right, I won't bug them. All right, we got to get out of the room. So if you have questions, we'll hang out there for you guys. Thank you all.